I am deeply aware of how weird it is to sit in a meditation class like this, an eyes open class with a teacher staring at you and using what's called Mudra, which is hand movements, to affect a kind of dialogue or energy exchange with you, since there's really no precedent for it in day-to-day life. I mean, people talk to you and they move their hands and they do things and say things and they touch you and they point at you and they say, well, I wish they would understand up there. Or there's a lot of weirdness in terms of human exchange and dialogue. But this class is very specific in its weirdness. On the other hand, this is a class about transmission, sharing, at least in the sitting part, a wordless, energetic experience with you. People who are new to this class, and there are a fair number today, must have a question mark going on in their head, like, what is he doing? Or what is that about? On the other hand, every so often there's an actual experience of, oh, feels interesting. Kind of the mind goes a little numb and you just watch this ballet of mudra-like motion. And you settle in. Because it kind of doesn't matter what exactly he's doing, because you're here for the duration. And if you're lucky, if grace descends, you will feel touched by something. You won't know what that touch is. You won't know how to give it a name. It may feel a little bit like how your mother held you when you were little, when she just touched you on your forehead or your chest or your back or patted you a little bit. It may be a lover who came to you once and just held you in a particular way. But here's this 70, almost 77-year-old guy just looking at you and doing the same thing. And it is weird. But the exchange is really not dissimilar to being touched by someone who truly, deeply loves you. It's touch at a distance, but it's touch. And I'd like to talk a little bit today about touch. It seems an important moment for that. One of the classes that's being taught in California today was canceled because of the coronavirus. Those of you who hear this 20 years from now won't know what I'm talking about. But there is a virus and a potential pandemic and people are panicking. But so far in this country, it has not been very big. One person has died. And people now are afraid of touching. We shouldn't shake hands. We shouldn't even get too close to each other, and probably we should wear masks, they say. I think it's premature to get panicky about something like that. On the other hand, it exemplifies for me this fear that we have of each other and of contaminating one another and of touching one another. We tend to want to do that as quick as possible. There's a lot of people who hug like patting on the back, get that over with, move on. I'm not that person. If I touch somebody or hug them, it's a hug, and I hold it for a moment. You can be accused of all sorts of things for having done that, especially with the opposite sex, but I risk that, I take that risk. I just love people, and I feel the urge to touch in any way possible. But I have to say, spiritual touch is not physical. Exactly. Spiritual touch is a empathetic reaching out to the other. And it is, in the way that it works in this class, and I think something worth trying to impart to people. I've never really talked about it. I've never fully understood it. Somewhere along the line, my hands began to move, and my arms, and my fingers, and they started to communicate with the people in the room. And I saw in Buddhist studies the whole idea of mudra, which are hand positionings that create different energy experiences. And I never read about how you use that or how you send energy to people or how you communicate in that way. But I've been told, and I know that's a weird idea, what to do. It tells me how to move and how to communicate. It uses the image of dowsing, which is those people who have this strange gift of being able to walk around with these sticks and point them at the ground and know where there's running water beneath, where they can drill a well. I don't have a specific gift for dowsing, but I have a gift for digging into you, your being, your psyche, and finding the flow, where there is an absence of flow, where there is an obstruction, where there is at some points ancient prehistoric obstruction, maybe from past lives. I don't really know. I don't have an intellectual grasp of what it is I am doing. I am being directed by something deep inside me, which is called feeling. And these feelings are telling me what to do. They have to bypass the mind because the mind says, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? The feelings don't do that. They just lead. And they tell me when I have it right. They tell me when I have reached into a person beyond me in some psychic sense, and when I have hit the right note or chord, and it literally internally goes for me something like da-da-da-da, and it feels like that. And I go, oh, it is symphonic in its best moments. It is orchestral. And in a way, a class is an orchestra that is being conducted, and you have no idea how much whatever that array of angelic beings or higher beings or whatever you want to call them, there is an appreciation for the music that rises out of this classroom. I'm using that metaphorically as well as realistically and specifically because something melodic takes place here. There is a kind of unusual gathering that does not happen everywhere, where there is a conducting of energy release and rising energy that goes up into some higher sphere and creates what they do call the music of the spheres. And we are the producers of that music, and for some reason I have been appointed a conductor. My job is to touch the strings of your heart. My job is to find the thing within you that creates the perfect note, to open the channel in you that allows something musical and loving and beautiful to flow through it. And I am not allowed to stop working with you until that note has been sounded, until that release has taken place. And I do not get what I'm doing at all. But I know I am told when it is right, and I am told when it is not right, and they keep me moving in ways that make no sense to me, but I know that I have to do it. And I've become more and more instructable and instructed by something that knows, and I can feel it, knows what it's doing. And I know what it's doing because the symphony is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I'm not a Beethoven, I know that, or a Rimsky-Korsakov, but I know beautiful music when I hear it, and you guys are playing beautiful, beautiful music. What does it mean to touch? Well, We all know it. We've all experienced it. There is really the touch of a little baby. That's pretty knowable. You touch a baby, and what happens to you when you touch a baby? Most of us. There's a sweetness. There is a connection. There is a sense of innocence. There's a sense of beauty and potential and power and knowing that comes from touching a baby. You can just touch their belly. You can put your hand on the top of their head. You can hold their hand. It's so beautiful. What happens when you touch a lover? Well, we all have experienced that. We all know there is something beyond magnetic in that touch. It stimulates us so greatly that it actually goes so far as wanting to produce more life in the world because it's so remarkable, that level of touch. We can touch a heart literally by putting your hand on a chest or by feeling something in us, expressing something in us that feels honest, truthful, real, caring, compassionate. And another heart feels that, and it expresses itself back with a kind of gratitude of its own, a kind of opening. And there's a shared connection that two people have touched. Maybe not physically, but touched emotionally. Touch is a wonderful thing physically, and it is an exquisite thing when it's not physical. When we touch others with our words, with our look, with our singing, with our dancing, with our expression, with our art, with whatever it is, we reach out to touch people. And touch is something we live for, to be touched, to be moved, to be felt, to feel something. It's more important than to think and understand and somehow contextualize things in the brain. It's much deeper than that. It's so exquisite. Learning how to touch is everything. And if you want to know a secret, you begin life by touching yourself. You touch you. Your hand finds touch as the best exploratory part of your being. Yes, it looks at things, but it can't make sense of it. But touch, it knows. And watching your fingers, look at a little baby, touch its thumb to its forefinger. And why is it in meditation that we are told, those of us who are instructed this way, to sit with our hands palms up, forefinger and thumb together? This whole journey begins by touching yourself. It's about touching you. The whole experience of manifestation and finding millions of others out there is learning how to touch others. But you can't be good at touching others until you have learned to touch you. Touching yourself is a physiological hand, thumb and forefinger together, sitting. That's the beginning, and it feels wonderful. And there are lots of versions of it. This, if the camera sees me, touching yourself, gripping yourself, holding yourself together, cutting yourself off from the world, knowing that you're protected. There's so many different ways of touching yourself. There's just a whole journey in knowing your body and knowing its form and knowing how it is meant to move through time and space. But there's another level of touching yourself that is not physical. And it's sitting still and moving into what we call these chakra spaces. This was mind, but the real one for feeling and touching is the heart. Also the belly, but heart. Let's just go to the heart. Sitting there. And what happens when you sit in your heart? Well, first, most people can't do that. The heart may stimulate itself by seeing someone you love or care about. You may suddenly have a feeling for a baby. You may suddenly be watching a movie and your heart just goes, oh, and you open through empathy. But feeling your heart, let's just say you're in the middle of the day and you're sitting still. Let's say you're walking around not sitting still. And your heart's aching, or you're just feeling weird or feeling discomforted. If you stop and you take a breath into this upper part of your chest that surrounds your heart, and you make room, you may start to feel, oh, and you feel your heart. Oh. And what does it feel like? Sweet, comforting. You may feel it open. This feeling of tightness releases, a feeling of embrace, a feeling of openness, of power and reach and expansion, all coming from right here. The meditative practice allows you to sit right here until that opens. Ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Right here. You sit here and you wait. Most people are impatient and they never find it. They just don't have the time. They're too busy. They got to go on the phone. They got to, all the things we do. But sit here and watch what happens when you sit here long enough and kind of ask for it to open. And all of a sudden, it does. And not only does it open, but the feeling of its opening is so joyous. And then there is this thing I've talked about to many of you, which is the welcome in. The open door welcomes you, and you step inside, and you're home. And it feels like, you got out of the car, it's snowing, you went over the mud, you're freezing cold, you get into the house, the door opens, warmth, comfort. You take off your coat, you take off your boots, you sit in a chair, and you go, and you feel home. This is where you live. This is your center. It is your right to be there. And if you will let go of waiting for the world to give you that comfort, you can just take it right now and go in. If you're waiting for the boyfriend you don't have, or the mother, or the girlfriend, or the wife, or the husband who isn't welcoming you properly, go here. Go here. You will always be welcomed. You will always be home. And then when you start to feel really at home, you can begin to welcome others in. Not that they can go literally into your heart, but your heart can open to contain them. And you start to love others, and you start to feel this expansive experience of love for someone other than you. And in fact, for many people, they don't even have love for themselves, so that becomes a very difficult practice. But if you get this love working inside, you can love others, and that space becomes bigger and bigger and bigger beyond anything that one can really describe. We were in California last week giving classes in Oakland and a class in Pasadena. And all of these people who I love arrived. I have never felt the capacity inside to love and touch and be touched by so many people before. It was the most remarkable experience, that I loved them so much, and the love that came back and filled the room, and we all sat in this space of being touched by one another. But being touched not only by one another, but by a transcendent version of that, which was singular and highly purposeful, and it just came and took us all in together. You don't get that day by day in your life. You just don't get it. Where do you go to get that kind of love, to be touched that way? So we're living in an era of viruses where you shouldn't touch. So if you are going to be cut off from touching physically, you don't want to be cut off from touching emotionally, from touching and being touched by another at a distance, if you will, even if it's 4 inches away, even if it's a mile away or 1,000 miles away. We can be touched by the experience of connectivity and love. The Mudra work I do was not taught to me. It totally arose spontaneously. Maybe I'm full of shit, and maybe I'm not doing anything, and it looks just like some weird action of ballet and things. That's for you to determine. But I will tell you, the directive I have for moving my hands and moving my body and my arms is so powerful that I cannot ignore it. I'm going to assume if you people continue to come here, you are getting something for it. You are being touched. If I'm wrong about that, as I've said many times, nobody will come, and Blanche and I will have a nice lazy Sunday morning, which is totally fine. I sit here because something that I cannot tell you what it is, you can give it a million different names, but it is greater than all of us, and it comes and it says, do this, share this, give this, teach people how to do it. I do not want to be the teacher with you being students as a role play. I don't like that. I would like each of you to be teachers in your own right. Each of you to go out there and touch the world, touch people who need to be touched, and touch them sincerely and deeply. If you can give hugs, hold it just long enough so there's a real exchange. If you shake someone's hand, feel it. If you can't touch in that way, look at them in a way that actually says, hello, we're connected. We're connected. And that connection is a real thing. And as a awakening person, as someone who practices meditation and can go deeper into the sphere of feeling and knowing, when you look at somebody, look harder. Not harder in like what I'm doing. It's like feel deeper. Look at who you're talking to. Look at the person you're with and allow that connection to occur. Touching is connection. This is a conduit. This is a circuit. When you touch this, you connect to yourself. When you touch another, you connect to them. Touching is the greatest gift, and it may be why we have manifested in a material body. Because touching in the abstract is fine, but somehow God wants to touch itself. And it made all of us as partners in that touching experience, to know we're okay. Now, of course, it's become very corrupted. There are people who hurt each other. There are people who kill each other. There are kinds of touching that are evil and dark. I know that all exists. I don't want to be innocent about any of that. On the other hand, once you choose a path that has to do with, as best you can do it, love and connection and affection and joy, be the teacher of that. Teach it not verbally, but in the way you are, in the way you express yourself. One of the most remarkable forms of touching is called presence. Presence is not doing very much of anything. It's just showing up and being alive and loving and well in a particular space and letting it envelop the space, and then watch what happens to people who are in that space. I will tell you from experience, people who are not happy to be there, people who don't even like you, people who have other things on their mind, suddenly don't remember why they don't like you, suddenly are kind of happy that they've showed up, and the space fills with a kind of welcoming contentment. It's really amazing. And I've watched it happen over and over and over. You can be in a space of resistance and people who do not like you, who in the end kind of like you. Feeling and touching are part of the same cycle. They're part of the same thing. It's important to learn how to be available to both. And I will tell you, it's not engineered by, it should not be engineered by the brain saying, oh, I should love that person. Oh, I should be nice. You can do that. That's not a terrible thing. But I will tell you, the best thing is this voice or knowing that is transcendent of you and your body and your conditioning and your sense of self. Something in you fills you or even surrounds you, and it just goes, do this now. Do this now. And you will probably go, really? Put your hand on their shoulder, really? That doesn't feel right. Do it now. Oh, the look in their eye, the feeling in your body feel right. If you're listening to your mind, it might not be quite so effective. But this feeling of do it now should not come from the brain and it should not have words in it. It should be in your heart and a directive that feels rather than thinks. Thinking can get you in trouble. This will not get you in trouble. It really has an authentic directive. It is the guidance system for your entire life. People who do not find the guidance system here make endless mistakes in the world, and you see them, and you can pity them. You can even help them course correct if they're open to being corrected, but not from your talk in your brain, but through emotional, transformational space. As a screenwriter, as a guy who writes movies, my Aunt Esther said to me, "Why do you always make me have to cry? Why do all your movies make me cry?" I don't know why, but I do know that people were affected by the crying. I do know they walked out of the theater feeling purified by the crying, feeling uplifted by it. Somehow I touched something. How do I touch things? I have no idea, except I have been touched, I feel it when I am touched, and I live from that space so I can touch others. And I have discovered when you touch others, the feeling of emotional satisfaction is enormous. It's enormous. And it feels so good. And so we keep doing it. Also, in my journeying up into whatever you want to call it, higher spheres of reality, the guys upstairs who I talked about a week or two ago, they like it when you do that. They go, yep, yep, yep. It's better than getting nope, nope. Yep means you followed your heart. You followed your gut, not your mind. This mind that we have is like a computer that keeps going on the fritz. You know, you've got to reset it over and over again. It doesn't connect to the internet. It has all these issues. The mind is very imperfect. The heart is not so imperfect. In the end, and I say this without knowing it for sure, but I think the part of you that leaves this world is the heart. I think that's what goes with you. In the movie Ghost, my last line is, "The love inside, you take it with you." I believe that. I got a note from some guy this weekend who wrote me out of the blue. People start to do that and said, "How do you know what you know in Ghost? How do you know about that?" And I said, "Well, I've been meditating for years, and maybe that's how I know." He said, well, he didn't understand that, but he said, "I had a near-death experience several years ago, and it was exactly what you described in your movie. And I want to know how you knew that. Have you had a near-death experience?" Anyway, I don't know if I should write him about LSD in the 1960s or what I should do to assuage him, but I will tell you, there are those who know that love is the way, love is a feeling, and love is a form of touching and being touched. And each of us is, if we're available to that feeling, if we open ourselves to it, we will discover that the opening has no end point. It can open beyond anything you can possibly imagine. It is overwhelming to the point of drowning out the separate you in its oceanic aspect, and you become this living, pulsating, loving being, which is really the core of what it means to be a human being. We are in training for that. If you move toward that, your life will be graced by the love you put out and the love you feel. It's so simple. This is not drama. This is not this is not something you're going to get in high school or college or in your PhD thesis. This is something that just comes from living in a particular way, and mostly, I think, sitting still long enough on a daily basis to make contact with that space. Feel, touch yourself. Touch who you are. Touch this extraordinary cosmological, universal, God-inspired reality that you are. Touch it. Touch it. It's really as simple as this. When I do this, I feel I am. Any questions? That's really all I have to say. I guess I can just say thank you guys for coming. I know there's some new people here. I hope this wasn't too cerebral. I really love you guys. I really love you guys. Thank you very much.